Testing. Undo. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Not yet. Go live. Oh, okay. Still gotta do some stuff here. All right. Almost ready. Okay. Oh, hello. Yep. Levels are good. We're gonna roll here, and yeah, hopefully that's good in terms of the audio. Um, and so yes, this is the Black Ponderer. Welcome. This is what is it? A YouTube channel. Sorry, I just got off of doing some other things. But yes, of course, it's a YouTube channel. We're on YouTube, but it's a philosophy YouTube channel. We talk about philosophy here. In case you're watching later on or something like that, or you're new here, and yeah, we just talk about philosophy. Usually, we read philosophical texts that have some philosophical themes in it, and then we will just commentate on the text, and I'll highlight some themes that I found in the text, and then we'll just have an engaging conversation. Now, I traditionally done videos where I just read a text. It's more like a talking at you video, where the live streams are more loosey-goosey, and they used to be just not even about text so much. It was just about themes. But we've been delving into the text in the live streams because that just works well with my schedule right now. So that's what we're doing. But just to let you know that the live streams are more of a laid-back format. Although, I mean, most of my videos are pretty laid back. So is it really much of a difference? I don't know. So we're going to be continuing our discussion on the queer art of failure. It was the introduction. Yes, and it was a text on some queer theory. Some, I guess, third wave feminism. And, we're just going to just roll with that, just keep going along. We didn't finish because we got on some tangents, which were fine. That's cool because we're just hanging out here. The live streams are more we're just chilling, and it was a lot. But we will keep it rolling here and just go straight to some more quotes. Feel free to comment if you want to, or just lay back and listen. It's cool. I know it's like where I'm from, it's Saturday evening, right? 7 p.m. here where I'm at on a Saturday. It's like most people are out just chilling at this time. So I understand most people are out, but this is the opening I had available, and it's all good. So the few people who are here, thanks, and if you're watching from home later on, all good. So let's get started. Yeah, so we were just continuing here with some quotes that I highlighted here in this text. And here's a quote. Teaching was not in the slightest about cramming students with knowledge and having them repeat it like parrots. Okay. So I guess I'm just like getting straight to it. The title and the author's name are like in the description, the title of the YouTube video. So that's where we're rolling. So yeah, you're just reciting knowledge like parrots. But he knew equally well that students had to avoid the chance detours. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Where minds still incapable of distinguishing the essential from the accessory, the principle from the consequence, get lost. While the good teacher leads the students along the pathway of rationality, the ignorant schoolmaster must actually allow them to get lost in order for them to experience confusion and then find their own way out or back or around. So it's allowing failure for the experience. Okay, so this is about the article is about the queer art of failure, and so we got to think about the society that we live in, And it's pretty absurd society, isn't it? If you just look at the way society functions today in terms of, I mean, all you gotta do is look at politics, right? Very absurdist right now. I mean, it's always been absurdist, but now it's kind of like in the forefront, right, in your face. And a lot of these, it's in the forefront, it's in your face, but they've always existed, right? And we're talking about a lot of these social, economic institutions like healthcare or education or why am I tripping right now? Housing. Housing is another, the real estate market, the market in general, the marketplace of ideas, the internet. There's a lot of craziness going on. Right? Does this stuff make sense, right? I know in the United States of America, just to give you some examples, right? United States of America right now, the government is working toward dismantling the Department of Education. That's very, I don't know how intelligent that is, but that's what's happening. I would put that in the absurdist thing. So, the article is just saying how, look, we have these systems, and perhaps it's good that we fail at them because the criteria for success is not good. It's like, so we want to successfully dismantle a Department of Education, and then when we do that, we're a success. Well, maybe we should fail at that. Maybe we should keep the department, that kind of thing. So there's this broadening here, like queer theory. It's not just about like sexuality and gender necessarily. It's more about like kind of failing, quote unquote, at the established norms, right? Because, being queer, gay, straight, lesbian, transgender, intersex, like all these, identities that are other, that are not part of the heteronormative, right? The binary gender, man, woman. People who fall under that umbrella are, considered failures in the social society. But the article is saying like, well, maybe it's a indicator of how fucked up these systems are, right? And maybe failing in these systems are good because now we can start learning about, well, what are the problems with these systems? And so like the article I just read that about like reciting, the education system is about just basically regurgitating information, right? I mean, really, the education system that we have today, at least in America, but most everywhere in the world, right, is more about, creating laborers to work for corporations, right? That's kind of what's going on. Like, once you finish high school, you can do your minimum wage work, or like, you can do your work and you can work for companies, it might not just be minimum wage, it might be higher. And then of course, like if you go to college, quote unquote, like, quote unquote successful, because I know so many, we live in an age now where, you graduate from college, you're buried in debt, and you're not really working the job that you really wanted to work in, right? I know several of my friends are in that situation. So, but you go to work, and and we can just keep going with this with this quote, right? So I have a lot of artist friends. I have a lot of artists, people who who draw, illustrated. I grew up with a lot of artistic people. These type of people who would just carry notebooks during class time, and they would just doodle while the math teacher was trying to teach us about the quadratic formula. Like, y equals mx plus b, m equals the slope, B equals the y-intercept, and I'll calculate the slope, and then they would just be drawing pictures, and and it's funny because I know these friends of mine who would just draw, and then they became really good artists. They went to art school, they really learned how to draw at a very high level. And then they started joining companies like I'm talking about, what is it, like Wizards of the Coast, for instance. I think that company makes Magic the Gathering cards. And if you become an artist in that company, you're gonna get a lot of money. Or like, some people work for Blizzard. What is it? Activism Blizzard, the people that make Warcraft, and some went on to a lot of video game companies, a lot of fantasy game companies. But what happened is my friends tell me they would go there, and these places were toxic as fuck, right? Very toxic environments. Treating the workers like shit. Also very sexist, very homophobic, and they just quit. They're like, fuck it. And then the art that they were drawing, it was like, they weren't so much artists, they were more like designers. They were just like, they had to draw art that appealed to like business people. Like, you'd have these focus groups enter, and you'd have stakeholders, like shareholders, and they evaluate like, okay, I want this. And they draw their artistic vibe. They're like, no. We want this specific thing because we know this is what's going to sell, and you need to show a bit more cleavage, and make sure you see the legs, and make that guy more buff. I want to see that six pack, that kind of thing. And they just got, now a lot of these people that I know who got those jobs, they work as as baristas at cafes and stuff, and they got like $80,000 in debt or some shit. They kind of failed in the system because they didn't decide to, like, look, I'm not gonna be, I didn't go to art school to create like capital, to just create like art to just be made to sell, right? I want to create art that makes people think, but by doing that, you fail in this society, right? And when the article is talking about repeat it like parrots. You learn your anatomy and you learn your perspective when you learn how to draw perspective, vanishing points, and like horizontal line, and 3-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and then you're like, okay, I know what to do, da 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 da, and then you learn all the anatomy and stuff, and then you learn how to render and shit, and then you just regurgitate that to make a sellable image, right? But a lot of artist people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to create things out of my imagination, not just like based off of real life. But then that's a failure, So when you're drawing things outside of what's expected from like corporations, for instance, it's kind of like a queer art, right? It's like an art that's like outside the norm, and that's where this article is getting at. And he's and then if we're going to keep going with what was said in that quote about like, teachers should be allowing students to fail, not only allowing them to, draw, for example, we're talking about art, draw images that are not in perspective, maybe they're exaggerated or something, and things like that, or abstract art or things like that. Things that might not necessarily sell, although a lot of abstract art does sell in the market. I guess it depends on like the art gallery scene and all that. But it's interesting. So, well, we're getting more broader. We're getting more broader, right? In terms of when we think about queer theory, we're not simply focused on gender and sexuality. Although that's very important, and that's something that should be considered, but we're expanding it to like normativity in general, and what is considered normal and what is considered not normal, right? And why are these things considered normal and not normal? And is normal actually good? Right? And I would argue a lot of times in the society that we live, normal is actually really is bad, because it's like actually hurting us as a human species. But let's keep going with some more quotes here. Let's see here. That's 14, page 15. Incarcerated knowledge, and then the artist. So the author is throwing out these terms. Here's another one. Suspect memorialization. I'm sorry. Suspect, a verb. Suspect memorialization, okay? Advocate for certain forms of erasure over memory, precisely because memorialization has a tendency to tidy up disorderly histories of slavery, the Holocaust, wars, etc. And then forgetting becomes a way of resisting the heroic and grand logics of recall, and unleashes new forms of memory that relate more to spectrality than to hard evidence, to lost genealogies than to inheritance, to erasure than to inscription. And then I put my notes here on the side and the margins, e.g., for example, Confederate statues, right, here in America, right? I'm an American United States of American citizen, so a lot of these, my frame comes from that, particularly because I'm a Black American, Black Ponderer. So I'm always, my mind is kind of in that zone. Refusing to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. That's another one. Taking a knee during like the national anthem. That was the whole big thing back a few years back. That kind of stuff. So when we think about, because there's this whole thing about erasure, and how erasure is bad in many ways, for the erasure of cultures in our society. But sometimes erasure is like not bad. For example, the erasure of like Nazi, Nazism, because that's not the term, right? Where Germany, you can't even show a lot of Nazi stuff because it's illegal. But here in America, you do that stuff, and it's like, well, it's freedom of speech. Case in point, like Elon Musk doing the Hitler salute during some national speech when they were welcoming that kind of shit, right? And so you would say, like, I think maybe we should stop, allowing that shit to perpetuate, right? But then people will be like, well, that's erasure. You're erasing history. And it's like, well, you gotta understand that shit is dangerous, right? Right? People, it fucks up people's minds, and then people will start spreading hatred, which actually, harms and kills people. But some erasure is good, like taking down like Confederate statues, for instance, because you're not only are you celebrating people who were forced enslavement of human beings, right? But you're also celebrating like actual traitors of the country, right? Because the Confederates were like literal traitors of the United States of America. But apparently, like that's history. But, yeah, so that's where you're getting at. So it's even like questioning, like, think about these things that we hold true, and maybe we should fail at these things too. You're failing at being an American. Well, maybe that's not such a bad thing. One cannot subscribe to the text of Marxism as if it were etched in stone. He draws attention to the historical specificity of political structures and suggests that we adjust to developments that Marx and Marxism could not predict or otherwise account for. Orthodoxy is a luxury we cannot afford, even when it means adherence to an orthodox leftist vision. And now we're just talking about like Marxism, which is a thing that we talk about a lot in the Black Ponderer, or a recurring thing that comes up from time to time. you know, and we're using these as examples to talk about, you know, the overall theme of like, and the theme being like orthodoxy is a luxury we cannot afford, right? And you can use that for like the Bible, or like, yeah, Mark Capital by Karl Marx. I always push the Bible as like a book that like, yeah, you should absolutely not be reading that book, and accepting it in its literal sense, right? Because that would be very bad. Because there's a lot of problematic stuff in the Bible, in terms of like how the Bible talks about how women should be treated. As the Bible has a lot of condoning of violence, and so we need to like take a step back and see it's like the historical context, and then gotta take, analyze and like say like, okay, these are the good things we could draw from the Bible, and these are the things that we should like leave out. But in this day and age with Christian fundamentalism, that's a hard sell, right? And the same thing with Marxism, right? Marxism, a lot of those people, a lot of that realm is atheist, right? So they're like non-religious, but then they treat Marxism as a religion sometimes. And I've talked about, we've done a lot of videos on Marx here at the Black Ponderer. I've done all the videos. I've read Capital, commented on it. I've done the Communist Manifesto. And I've done, and then you also got, then you could go to the more extreme realm of like Marxist Leninism, right? Where it's really like, wow, you guys treat this like a religion, don't you? And where it's literally like word for word, everything is right. It's like, well, hold on, like what the author is saying is like, you draw attention to the historical specificity. So, just saying like, let's think about the historical context of his time and say like, okay, that applied then. And Karl Marx had to just not try and deride, or is that a word, deride? Not to bash Marx. Marx is highly intelligent, had some very important critiques about capitalism, was, in my opinion, correct in a lot of what he wrote in criticizing capitalism. And his philosophy, his political, social economic philosophy is like, a lot of it is spot on. So good on Marx. But some of it isn't, and you say that, people have a hissy fit like, what? You defile like everything he says. Well, no, not everything, right? Which we could talk about. So, but it's important to apply Marxism in ways that make sense, in ways that are applicable to our history, right? Because it's different than when he wrote Capital than it is now, right? And then open here means questioning, open to unpredictable outcomes, not fixed on telos, unsure, adaptable, shifting, flexible, and adjustable. And open pedagogy in the spirit of Rancière. These are French names. I can't. Fier. Also, these are just names. I don't know them. So maybe you know. Well, there's no way you can know them because I'm mispronouncing them. Oops. So in the spirit of these critical theorists, also detached itself from the prescriptive methods, fixed logics, and epistemes, and it orients us toward problem-solving knowledge or social visions of radical justice. Let's keep going. So now we talk about hegemony. Is the term for a multi-layered system by which a dominant group achieves power not through coercion, but through the production of an interlocking system of ideas which persuades people of the rightness of any given set of often contradictory ideas and perspectives. So, yeah. And we talk. That's another concept that's brought up a lot in philosophy. Contradiction, right? Many philosophers, one of the most famous ones is Hegel, where he went in extreme detail about contradiction. But even the ancient Greeks brought up the concept of contradictions, in a sense that there's the Webster's dictionary idea of contradiction, where it's just like two you're in a situation and then something else happens, and then which is directly opposing the situation. So now you're in this logical fallacy scenario. Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction. But then some of the great philosophers like Hegel and even Plato and such. Marx was another one that brought this up, and even and then the Marxist Leninists take those philosophers take it contradiction and really go off the rails with it. But it's this idea that, look, life is a contradiction. Life is a contradiction. Like, life is opposing opposites constantly, right? And so, but that's good, because that's how life moves forward. It's about reconciling these contradictions of life, right? And then so but through production of an interlocking system of ideas, which persuades people of the righteousness of any given set of often contradictory ideas. So when you put these opposing ideas together, right, these contradictions in a way that is progressive, this is kind of this is a sort of hegemony, is what is being said here. And then the author throws out the term common sense. A set of beliefs that are persuasive precisely because they do not present themselves as ideology or try to win consent, right? So that's, the author brings that up because it's there's no room for failure at that point. It's like, well, you're supposed to get a job, right? You get a job. Why? Because it's just duh. It's like, that's what you're supposed to do, is to get a career. You go to college, you get your degree, you work for a corporation for, 40, 50 years. You get your 401k and your pension. That's like a boomer thing. Yeah. This current generation, we don't, that's not really a thing anymore. Not realistic. Although, that's the expectation. That's the expectation. And it's just common sense. And then so, when you're not doing that, when you get your degree and you're still struggling to find a job, and it's been almost a decade, right? And you're like, damn, I still don't have my 401k. Where's my house? I don't have a mortgage. I'm still living with 5 roommates, or in the basement of my parents' houses or whatever. You're a failure. And then the idea is, well, yeah, you're not following common sense. But, the author's like, let's move away from that, because, common sense. My mama always said, common sense ain't common anymore. She would always say that. I don't really know exactly what she meant, but that's what her sayings mean. Common sense ain't common anymore. Okay, let's read on. To sort through the contradictions of capitalism and illuminate the oppressive forms of governance that have infiltrated everyday life. Yep, this is Marxism, where it talks about how, check out my videos about Marx on that one. Contradictions, not common sense, tell us more about our conditions. The failure of capitalism gives us explanations. Those are my notes. So let's look at the failures of capitalism. Some people will say, capitalism is one of the most successful economic systems that we have. It's created millionaires, it's created billionaires. It's but almost everybody isn't a millionaire or a billionaire, right? Most people are, trying to make ends meet, right? And then, further on, but we got our PlayStation 5s, and our Nintendo Switches, and we have Netflix, and we have like cell phones, well, I guess smartphones. Right? That's capitalism. It's like, yeah, but let's look at the smartphone, right? The focus, people's ability to focus has just been destroyed, right? We can always constantly looking at our phones, right? Social media. Now we got this whole thing about doom scrolling, right? That's capitalism, right? That's kind of a failure of like the whole concept of doom scrolling, right? That's a failure of capitalism, right? Because like doom scroll, it's a form, tech companies, create these apps that make you addicted, because now our attention is now a commodity product, right? Now you can make money off of our attention, right? And so it's like part of the, our attention is being exploited, right? And is that a good thing? No, right? That's a failure of capitalism. All right. And so I can tell you about the conditions of our society, like how, our socioeconomic conditions have failed. And we're using capitalism as an example. It's a very good example to use. But you can use many other socioeconomic systems throughout the years. Like, failed communist states, like, like the USSR and Maoist China, which, it's fun. It's so interesting, right? That's a contradiction too. Like China is called the Communist Republic of China. There's not much communist about. I guess the history of it, right? But it's very capitalist, right? Right. It's very capitalist. That in itself is a contradiction, right? Anyway. And then the author brings up counter-hegemony was the production and circulation of another competing set of ideas which could join in an active struggle to change society. Mm-hmm. And then we go into, now the author's just dropping these terms, which, we could talk about. They're interesting. Economism. Economism is, this idea of like, everything can be saved through the economy, like, trickle down economics, and like, give somebody, people who are like, just invest in stocks. That'll help you. You got to get into the business. You got to get in that venture capital game, and then you'll win. But so that's kind of like the more superficial level, but the kind of more grandiose or deeper way of thinking about economism, is this idea that, free markets are the solution, or like, I guess the term that was thrown out here in the Americas, right, is neoliberalism, right? This idea like, well, corporations should have rights, you should allow corporations as much freedom as possible, because ultimately that's how society grows, is through like the free marketplace, right? And that's just such a ridiculous ass notion, as maybe you can tell by now. Some people are like, well, that's true. The market is handicapped, and that's why it's like, what are you talking about? The market, like, these business people have free reign to do whatever the fuck they want. We literally have a businessman currently, like, changing government fundamentally, right? Business, you get, during Trump's inauguration, you had like, in attendance was Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all these rich ass motherfuckers who basically are like the controllers of the free world, to be frank. And they're just, so yeah, I think it's pretty clear that this whole notion of the free marketplace is a failure. like that is not the way that society will prosper, is through that. But anyway, let's go back to some more quotes. Too rigid theorization of the relation between base and superstructure. And that's, now we're getting back into like Marxist Leninism thinking. Since the article brought it up, like people who are like hardcore Marxists who are like, yes, dialectical materialism. You have to get through the stages of capitalism. First, there's like proto-capitalism, and then then there's mercantilism, and then there's capital, and then it goes all the way up to imperialism, and then the proletariat will revolt, and then we will have socialism, and then we'll have communism, and it has this whole structure of shit. And it's like, yeah, the theory is too rigid there. In order for a system to work, it has to keep creating and maintaining the structures or the structured relations which allow it to function. But this is not the same as saying that the economic base determines the form of every other social force. Economism. Okay. Only, let me see here. Yes. Only to moralizing and cheap insight and does not allow for a complex understanding of social relations that both sustain the mode of production and can change it. Okay, so let's talk about that. But oh damn it. So here's the thing. I've for the first time in my life, I have been prescribed. I went to the ophthalmologist, the eye doctor. They're like, okay, I think you need reading glasses. I'm like, oh shit, I'm old. So I'm gonna be right back. Just give me a few seconds, like 20 seconds. I gotta get my reading glasses. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Oh, right here. All right, yeah, here they are. I thought they were in another room, but they were right here. Oh, Lord. Oh, no. Don't be ashamed. Just embrace it. Wow, that's like so much better. All right. Does not really allow for a complex understanding of the social relations. Right. So yeah, you need to allow for you got to consider the social relations. Now, it's I feel bad like always picking. Let's pick on something else. Let's not say Marxist Leninism. Let's say let's pick on capitalism and say like, yeah, this idea that I think the article we talked about that in the first part of the part one of this read of how this idea that people just need to work harder. People need to work harder and then they will succeed in capitalism. Success in capitalism is all about how much you work, right? If you put effort into it, you will get rewarded. And of course, like that is not, you're not thinking deeply about the social relations, right? Like there's, as we all know, there's people who don't work out, basically, they don't work at all and they're like millionaires, right? Or higher, right? And then there's people who work their asses off who are like broke all the fucking time. And, I would argue like the vast majority of people who are working extremely hard are making very little money, right? So yeah, we got like, so what else? So what's going on here? It's a social relation with society. Then you start thinking about like, well, there's this thing called oppression, discrimination, exploitation, and maybe these are the things that are like feeding into like who's rich, who's wealthy, and who's not, right? So yeah. Refuse the common wisdom about these movements, i.e., that they were random and not focused on any particular political goal. Exactly, right? And then so you bring that up, the whole like, well, not everybody that works hard makes money. It's like, and then the idea of the counter would be like, well, it's a dog eat dog world, so there's winners and losers, and survival of the fittest. Some people just are given the wrong cards. The life is like a game of poker, and sometimes you're given the bad hand, and it's a bad just roll of the dice, and some people just got it. It's like, well, that's not adequate either of a definition. Right. That's not a good definition at all, a good explanation at all, right? Because, there is a political goal that's happening, right? For some people to be billionaires, many other people have to be broke, right? That's kind of how it works, right? For a billionaire to exist, you have to have like a lot of broke ass people, right? Which is a political goal, but, people don't want to go there. Instead, they emphasize the power of cooperation within the anti-capitalist mob and pay careful attention to the alternatives that this many-headed hydra of resistant groups imagined and pursued. The more we understand about the development of capital itself, the more we understand that it is only part of the story. So, it's not all. That's another thing we talked about. That's kind of why we couldn't finish last time, because capital is a huge part of the story, but it's not everything. Like, let's say we eliminate capitalism. For those who are, I'm with most most of the leftists. I'm definitely not like a pro-cap. I know I look very like neoliberal free market. Power of the free market. Get your stocks. Invest in your a 401k. No, I think it's all bullshit. And I lean heavily toward socialist ideas, quote unquote. Free healthcare, free education. I'm like, hey, houses should be fucking free. Like, abolish the housing market. That should not be like, So I'm like, But even I'll say like, hey, man, if let's say we destroy capitalism, will like all things be solved? No, because there'll still be greed. We'll still have to deal with like sexism and like racism. Some people would argue like, well, capitalism creates these things. No, not necessary. No, that's not true. There's all these other, gender inequality will always, will be a thing in and outside of capitalism. All right, what else we got here? The history of alternative political formations is important because it contests social relations as given and allows us to access traditions of political action that, while not necessarily successful in the sense of becoming dominant, do offer models of contestation, rupture, and continuity for the political present. These histories also identify potent avenues of failure. Before I read this other sentence, let me stick to that, what I just read, with the history of alternative political formations, and how, like, okay, you might not hear them being blown up, but it's useful to, these are reading glasses. They're only effective when I'm reading up close, but when I'm like looking at the camera, they're not very good. So we're gonna be checking them on. I see why people they have them up like this. I see that now. Maybe I should be like that guy from Different World. When he has to flip. They don't sell those now. I guess that was the 1980s thing. Anyway, so an alternative history is like the history of mutual aid, right? The history of mutual aid and how there's a lot of egalitarian stuff going on. Now, you don't hear a lot about that, right? I was reading a lot about like, when Hurricane Katrina happened, but Hurricane Katrina was just this one instance, but there like a lot of these things are happening with a lot of these hurricanes that are happening nowadays. But it's people who are setting up food banks, and it's not just like Feed America and like churches, right? It's like just people, just regular people getting food together and giving it out to people, and also feeding themselves with it. There's a lot of like mutual aid action going on that we don't hear about. There's a whole history of that, man. I'll give you an example here in the city. I mentioned this before. There are several cities that do this. The city I live in does this. It's part of this group that's called 901 Community Fridges. It is a large ass group, right? And it's mostly done via social media. And this is and it's interesting because this is how like social media can be used for good, right? 901 Community Fridges, what they do is they set up refrigerators outside in the public. They build a shelter around it where it protects from the weather. But it's like accessible 24/7 to anybody. You just open it up, you can put food in, and you can take food out. There's no rules about who can take what. You just put in food or take it out, right? And we have several in this city, and we put them often in the middle of food deserts, places that are where you can't just go to a grocery store. That's my doggy. He likes to. We gotta shut the door because he's just too damn noisy. He loves his barking, but yeah, you don't hear about that kind of stuff, right? That's happening a lot in many cities, but you don't hear about it, right? And some people will say like, well, why are you doing that? You just supporting freeloading, and you're actually failing society because what you really need to do is you need to like create job programs, or you need to create like homeless to corporate pipelines to get people to learn job skills so that they can work, right? It's like, no, we just need to give people food, right? We need people to not starve, right? Like, why should you have to work to eat? Like, absurd, but yeah. So that's what's being said there with there's a lot of alternative histories out there, but they, you don't hear about them. So you have this common sense that is not applicable across all areas. These histories also identify potent avenues of failure. So that's all I'll say. Failures that we might build upon in order to counter the logics of success that have emerged from the triumphs of global capitalism. Like what I was just talking about. Like this idea of, you got to get that person needs to go learn some job skills. Is like, okay, first of all, you shouldn't have to work to eat. like that is a failure of capitalism. Like, so I have to work to survive. Like, what the fuck? It's just absurd. And we've been programmed to think this. You're like, well, yeah, you gotta pull your own weight, and if you're not pulling your own weight, then you deserve to die. It's like, huh? We have enough resources where that's not a thing that we even need to consider, right? 40% of all food that's produced in this world is just thrown out because it can't be sold. But it's good food. It just has some bruises on it, or there's just an influx and they just can't sell it fast enough. So it's like, well, we'll just throw it out. And it's like, well, okay, and then all these people start, So, yep. Let me open the door back. He's probably going to bark again at some point. Let's see. Dominant history teems with remnants of alternate possibilities. The job of the subversive intellectual is to trace the lines of the worlds they conjured and left behind. That's what I hope to do with this channel. I'm a subversive intellectual. Sure, I'll take that. I like to trace the lines of worlds they conjured and left behind. I mean, I would encourage you to check out my video. It's a live feature. Guys requested to be live about this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. This is about a lot of indigenous cultures that were, and then we talked about erasure, that have been erased. And these indigenous cultures, they rejected a lot of that whole like capitalist type of thinking. Right? They were more egalitarian, mutual aid, that kind of thinking. And you saw the common idea is like, well, they got wiped out. They're not here anymore, so it didn't work. Well, no, the reason why they got wiped out was because of capitalism. And, if we lived in those ways, we would probably be a lot better off. We wouldn't have to deal with, like, these enormous hurricanes that are destroying large. What was the last? The big. One of the big things was that one of those fires in LA that like destroyed so many homes, right? That happened like in the beginning of this year. Unprecedented, right? Unprecedented. Let's see here. Okay, so I read that. Boom. The humanities are the shock to common sense. The estranging move that will always make what we do unintelligible and incalculable, and that may realize or catalyze enough energy to blow out a few institutional fuses. She advocates for teachers to create monsters of their students and to sustain in the process unruly forms of relationality. I'm just bad at pronunciation, it's true. The pedagogical project of creating monsters. So what does that mean? I actually think I'm trying to do that here on the Black Ponderer YouTube channel. The Black Ponderer is a pedagogical project for creating monsters. It's an unruly form of relationality. How so? Well, a lot of people, I'll go down the rabbit hole once again. Why do you call yourself Black Ponderer? It's just it's distracting. It's like not real philosophy. Oh, really? Like, well, maybe it's actually forcing you to think about like things that you don't normally think about because you don't want to think about them, right? Like maybe like realizing concepts of race and racial inequality and to a broader sense social inequality are like the biggest problems that human beings face today, right? And maybe we should be putting more attention on how to solve that problem, right? But and then I create little monsters. Create a little monster. A little philosophy, and then so the idea is like, well, you're failing in philosophy because that's not how we roll. We talk about like Aristotle in his like forms, or was that Plato? The Platonic forms. We talk about I think therefore I am, Descartes. And then we talk about being in nothingness, Sartre. We don't, it's pure, right? But it's like, no, I want to talk about social inequality and why that's a thing. Well, Sartre didn't talk about that. Well, I'm talking about it, right? Well, you're failing in philosophy. That's fine. I want to fail in philosophy. I remember the first time I made a video about feminism. It was Black Feminist Thought was the book. And I got comments like, please do not talk. I mean, this was years ago. This was like, it was like 7, 8 years ago. Please don't put any videos about feminism on a philosophy channel. Don't do it. I see it. Philosophy is better than that. You're better than that. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, that's where the action is. That's where the philosophical action. That's where we need to make headway. But so yeah, and so we got some unruly forms of relationality going on there, and it is a pedagogical project of creating monsters, right? So that's what we're trying to do here on the Black Ponderer. All right, so what else? I can tell because my eyes are getting tired because they're focusing too hard on focusing on the word. So let me put my reading glasses on. I believe in low theory in popular places, in small. And so low theory is a term that the author uses to describe, looking at alternatives like feminism, like queer theory, alternative histories to derive like deep meaning. In popular places, small and inconsequential, the anti-monumental, the micro, the irrelevant. I believe in making a difference by thinking little thoughts and sharing them widely. I seek to provoke, annoy, bother, irritate, and amuse. I am chasing small projects, micro-politics, hunches, whims, and fancies. So we're looking. So that, I like doing that. And I'll always be a proponent of the feminism. Let's open the door again. Get some of that airflow going. To bother, irritate, and annoy. Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna do it. I know people are like, will you please change your YouTube channel title? I'm like, no. Well, it's irritating me. Well, be irritated. Well, I'm not going to subscribe. Well, it's a good thing I don't give a shit about that. What I want you to do is think. And you might, the response is, well, you're not making me think. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am. I am making you think. Hello, toy noise. And there's another term in activism. It's called agitprop, which is short for agitating propaganda, right? Developing flyers and brochures and passing them around that intentionally like rile up people in a good way. Like, ideas about abolition. Like, when somebody says abolish the police. And then of course, like many people's initial response to that is, oh shit, here we go with this. Right? But it's like, well, why is this a thing? Why are people saying this? Because maybe the institution of policing is fucked up and maybe it's time for us to do something about it. I know it might make your day a little like, it might put a rain on your parade, but the police put a lot of rain on a lot of people's parades, so maybe you should share that so you can actually get off your ass and do something better. And so that's agitprop, right? And that's what the author's talking about. Okay. Even our bodies do not belong to us. We have alienated them in exchange for money or have given parts of them up in a war. I mean, that's Karl Marx, that was his whole argument. It's like capitalism alienates ourselves from our bodies, right? Because we just become instruments of a corporate machine. What parades as civilization is actually barbarism, right? I mean, case in point, the criminal justice system. Like a close examination of the criminal justice system that we have basically almost anywhere, virtually anywhere on earth. But if we just want to talk about the United States of America, the criminal justice system is incredibly barbaric, right? And yet we have there's so many television shows that are cop shows. Like, we celebrate this, and it's like, well, how did we get here? We should be failing at this norm, right? This norm. And the animal, human, beasts, and spirited things insinuate that humanism is nothing more than an ideology. So what's that? The idea of what it means to be human has been constructed. Therefore, the idea can be destructed. So, you know, you ask the question, what does it mean to be a human being? And so we have all these fabrications, you know. And most of them have to do with the gender binary, right? It's like, well, you know, if you're a man, you're probably naturally predisposed to violence. You're probably going to be a little violent. You're going to be aggressive. You're going to be dominant. You're going to know how to tie a tie. You're going to be able to change oil. Right? And, you know, you're going to pee standing up. You know, that's what and, you know, if you're a woman, you're submissive and, you know, you have babies and, you know, that's what it means to be a human. That's it. And it's like, and this is what we've limited humanity to. This kind of like simplicity, right? Right. But it's, but you know, these are just constructs in the mind, right? They don't have to be. And how do we know that? Because we see alternative human beings who are like doing alternative ways of those notions all the time, but we call them queer people, right? You know, we other them, you know, like trans people, intersex people, you know, basically people within all average completely reject that, just throw it out the window, right? Of course, maybe they're embracing some aspects of it and they're playing with it, you know, like gay people get married, like okay, there's some. But, you know, there's a failure of, you know, adopting that form of human being, right? But I would argue like that failure exposes a flaw in our understanding of human, of the way in you know, our understanding of the diversity of human being, right? Right? It's a lot more than what we've constructed, right? And then, yeah, he's just, the author here talks about like lowbrow entertainment like Looney Tunes or like old school Disney. They engaged in transformative violence. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped. Cartoons as a pedagogical opportunity, a chance for children to see the evil that lies behind the facade of bourgeois respectability, and for adults to recapture the visions of magical possibilities that were so palpable in childhood, and you know, like the grim fairy tales and things like that. They engaged in transformative violence, and they took humor rather than tragedy as their preferred medium for engaging the audience. Didn't I think a movie just came out where they about Looney Tunes. I guess they dug up some old ass Looney Tunes movie that they just never bothered to produce, and they just dug it up and like, okay, here's a movie. I think it's out like currently in theaters. It's like Daffy Duck and Porky Pig save the world from aliens or something. I hear it's like really. My friends say it's pretty good. I was a huge fan of Looney Tunes. That's not gonna lie. I love, you know, that kind of slapstick comedy is very funny to me. But you know, also, I mean, but also like a lot of that Looney Tunes stuff was pretty like fucked up problem. I mean, Speedy Gonzalez and shit. He's like, I mean, basically, all that shit was like, you know, racist propaganda. But it was still funny. They tried to modernize Looney Tunes. I remember that. They tried to make it into a sitcom. Everybody's using cell phones and shit. That didn't work. I like Looney Tunes, but I think maybe the author is kind of like, well, transformative violence, and they took humor rather than tragedy as their preferred medium for it. Okay, but it still was a little bit fucked up. What is the relationship between new forms of animation and alternative politics today? And then I put in my notes, also consider anime. I don't know. I don't know about that one. Because the author, I'm sorry, like the author, whatever pronoun the author uses, Judith Halberstam. Yeah, who knows? Wait a minute, let me just be like, you know, try and give a shit. let's be a little respectful. Not in the sense that try. Don't just be like, fuck it, it's not important. This is the okay. Let me see. He. Okay. Excellent. So okay, now I know. His work focuses largely on feminist and queer theory. Okay, all right. So the whole idea of cartoons as like this relevatory source of alternative knowledge. I don't know about all that. I mean, sure. I can see some of that, but a lot of that old school, and even like modern animation today. Well, there is like, I know like nowadays, you have like, Adventure Time and Steven Universe and like, all those progressive cartoons that are actually pretty. I've actually never watched them. Everybody tells me like they're awesome. My daughter is like, she really likes them. I guess they're just after my time. I grew up in like Ren and Stimpy days, where like cartoons were more stupid. I mean, they did have Rugrats, which was not like they had Doug Funny. So and then before that was Ninja Turtles. But now, I look at a lot of the modern. Although I think that even that era has passed, right? Because I was looking at Adventure Time and this Steven Universe. I'm like, wow, these cartoons are like deep as fuck. They're like really deep. I don't know if I would like, because I don't know, I kind of like my cartoons a bit more simple, but that's cool. I did not. I remember there was the cartoon Rick and Morty. I did not like that one. I didn't care too much about that. I think that was a bit too nihilistic. A bit too like, oh well, life sucks, we're gonna die anyway type of like, I'm not really. But I think that was more catering to like the times. Like that's how people feel these days. The meaning of failure as a way of being in the world allow for the fact that failure is also unbeing, and that these modes of unbeing and unbecoming propose a different relation to knowledge. Deconstructing human being. All right, we talked about that. Maybe like we have these notions of what it means to be a human being. Maybe like, but then there's already people living out alternative ways of being human. But if the only reason why they're alternative is because they go against these normative structures that society places on us. But actually, these are real, true ways of being. They're not really alternative in the sense that there are like, reject or like deviant ways of being that aren't inclusive to actual human being. Like, no, these are all of these ways of being. And if we're talking about queer theory, gay, lesbian, transgender, intersex, you just keep going, asexual, queer, it's like, just keep going, right? These are all normal ways of being, in a sense, like, this is what it means to be human. To be a human is to live diversely, and to constantly be to constantly unbecome, and then re-become again, and then unbecome, and then re-become again. It's like constantly reiterating your being in new and different ways. So, let's see here. So, boom. And then, oh Lord, my eyes are getting tired again. Now I'm a real philosopher because I got glasses. Failing well, failing often, and learning how to fail better, failure as a practice. Some of the most important intellectual leaps take place independently of university training, or in its aftermath, or as a detour around and away from the lessons that disciplined thinking meets out. To turn away from the quarrels that seem so important to the discipline and to engage the ideas that circulate widely in other communities. And that's just to say, like, you know, like basically directly what the quote said. Like, there are lots of extremely good ideas that happen that are outside the ivory tower of universities, or just, to say more broadly, outside normal structures of idea making. They're just people doing all types of random stuff, and or just different ways of being, and then all of a sudden, like, wow, that would be cool if that was the case. And you see that a lot on the internet. Hopefully, like, my channel is some of that, where people are like picking up information that they, and this isn't necessarily like a university. I'm not a college professor. I don't have a degree in philosophy, but you can absolutely, most certainly, engage in philosophy and learn philosophy and talk about philosophy at a very high level, and you do not need a philosophy degree or take any college level philosophy class. Was it low theory? You can apply low theory to philosophy. You can talk about the philosophy of, like, the cartoons that was discussed in part one of this reading. SpongeBob was mentioned. SpongeBob SquarePants. That's a kind of another cartoon that was like kind of deep. I think that was like the precursor, right? SpongeBob SquarePants, which was kind of slapstick comedy, but also would have little nuggets of, like, deep philosophy. And then they went all out with shows like Adventure Time and, like, Steven Universe, and I guess you would even say, like, Rick and Morty and that kind of stuff, where people are like, okay, we can actually really, like, go deep with the children programming. And that's funny. But yeah, I think that was the last. Yeah, that's the last quote I highlighted in this text. So I would encourage you to check it out if you want. The Queer Art of Failure by Judith Halberstam. We're just going to read that. That's the introduction chapter. We're just reading excerpts. And then we'll be going to another reading another excerpt later. I am currently reading, I don't know where is it. Oh, here it is. I think I showed this last time. I'm currently reading The Artist Cookbook. The Anarchist Cookbook. Now, it's not the old school Anarchist Cookbook where it teaches you how to make homemade bombs and shit, like Molotov cocktail. This is like another, like, a response, or like a kind of new Anarchist Cookbook that is about, and it's written by the founders of this organization called Food.Bombs, which is a non-violent organization. So it's about, like, non-violent direct action, which is funny. And it argues that anarchism is, anarchism in its most effective way is non-violent, right? And we should be cooking up anarchist actions that are non-violent and direct, right? And that's good. I think there's some stuff I could make a video about that for. So, we'll have a more traditional video with that. I'm just reading a lot of, like, activist texts nowadays because I'm really, like, getting myself involved in community activism in my city. So I'm like, okay, let me get well versed in this so I can, know what I'm doing out here. So yeah, I've been reading a lot. It's just like, this hasn't been, like, really, like, I've been trying to read stuff that I can apply to the streets, which is not necessarily, like, extremely deep philosophy. But we'll get back to the traditional videos. But that's it. That's all I want to talk about in this live stream. If nobody has any other comments, I think we'll close it here. Thanks a lot for joining me during this Saturday. I know it's like party time, but not everybody parties, right? Some people are homebodies, And yeah, I'm here for you. Yeah, this is just the time I had available. I think I'm actually gonna pop back on here later tonight to do another live stream. It's gonna, I think, a secret live stream. Probably gonna be like doing some Japanese study. I studied the Japanese language, and I think I need to catch up on some Japanese. I think I'm just gonna like live stream it and then like post the pre-record. I'm gonna record it and post it on my Patreon page. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Should I? Yeah. I think I'll do that. Yeah, I think I'll do that later today. Yeah, I'll just so in case you're free in a real late night, late night. That's what I'm gonna do. So you feel free to join me there or not. I can just be by myself. It'll just be like a Patreon video, but I'll live stream it here on the channel for all to see. But I'm probably gonna unlist it and put it on the Patreon page. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see y'all later. And, next week we'll probably talk about something else and some other philosophical text excerpt. Until then, bye bye.